My podcast series, Your Education Activist, Unscripted and Discovered, was inspired by my good friend Mark Murphy. Now, Mark is a 20-year travel industry veteran, recognized by his peers and the industry as an innovator at the cutting edge of online publishing, social media advertising, and brand marketing. And in his book, Travel Unscripted, published by High Point Executive Publishing, Mark shares that it wasn't until he and his camera crew decided to leave a tour group in Taiwan that they ended up creating the best content they had produced up until that point. It was then that Mark said Travel Unscripted was officially born. Inspired by Mark and his unscripted and discovered way, I visited him at his offices with a little pocket HD camera and a mini tripod and spent an hour picking his brain. Here is a segment from that adventure.
I wouldn't even look at the script until I was standing there. I wouldn't even know what the subject matter is going to be other than we're going to talk about cruises, and then boom, you go. And I'll tell you what, it makes it so much easier. Because then you're not reshooting it 5 times.
What was the beginning? What was the thought came with the idea?
All right, so the first thought was I want to do my own thing. And my wife and I were thinking about what I was going to do next. And I was a consultant, which basically meant I was unemployed and I needed to find little odd jobs in order to pay the bills. So that's what I did, number one. And in doing the consulting, I realized I didn't want to go back to the traditional corporate world, which I had been in for 20, well, not quite 20 years, about 15 years at that point in time. I wanted to do my own thing. And I went for an interview at the New Yorker magazine. And it was a job, would be the number 2 guy underneath the publisher, a path to become publisher within 2 to 3 years tops. And I had publishing background. And when I went in, the guy said, "Where do you want to be in 5 years?" And I pretty much told him, not here. And I walked out, and I had the job if I wanted it because I was teed up for it. I mean, I had relationships. But in that statement flowing out of my mouth pretty much sealed that fate. So when I got home, I said, "Hey, Karen," she said, "Do you want the good news or the bad news?" And I said, "It's pretty much the same. There's no way I'm getting that job," because I pretty much told him I'm not interested in doing anything other than helping him for a couple of years and then doing my own thing. She says, "You know what you need to do? We need to do you need to do your own thing." And she said, "Let's sell the freaking house. Let's move," because we talked about it. And she spurred me to basically get off my butt and make it happen. And you don't want to uproot your family because we had a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. My wife didn't have a job, was a homemaker, and I was the breadwinner. And I'm basically saying I'm going to go take a flyer and risk everything we've ever accumulated on a total flyer by moving to a town where we knew nobody and started a business. But my background was publishing, my background was media, my background was travel. It was the aftermath of 9/11. And 3 months after 9/11, we started working on this business. And it started out as looking at a marketplace, travel agents. Travel, so travel was in the doldrums. Travel agents were marked for death. They had sold over $100 billion in travel, business I knew very well, and everyone basically said they were done. So the people that were in the space, the media space, that were serving them, were the legacy companies that had high costs, outdated business models, and they were the ones most vulnerable at risk. I was starting from the ground up, low cost basis, starting on the internet, not starting with a print magazine, which is the traditional media. And I figured if the market went from $100 billion and fell 90% to $10 billion, it would still be a $10 billion market, and there'd be a need for someone to communicate between the suppliers and destinations and that distribution channel. Even if it was only $10 billion, it's still a lot of money. And if that indeed happened, then I'd be the last guy standing because the legacy models couldn't survive a 90% drop in that. But a new startup could because we had our costs very, very low. That was the original thought process to say, why travel agents, why travel? And then what ended up happening is we launched a site. It didn't work. Agents signed up but didn't do what we wanted them to do. And then I added new features, and then I started building content. And by building content, we gave travel agents reasons to come to the site, and I leveraged my expertise, and I basically started hiring people. So the first started with 3 guys. Then we added a 4th person about a year into it, and about 2.5, 3 years later we had 8 people on the staff, and today we have 60. So the first 3 years, 8 employees, very slow growth, losing money or breaking even, not making anything like I used to make, and then the next year it started to break out. But every time we had an opportunity, we took a risk. So we launched a magazine in 2004 that was print. So counterintuitive to what everyone else was doing, which is their print was dropping. And we said, print works, but talking to the right audience in the right way.
Right.
So it's the right content, talking to the right audience, so that magazine succeeded. Launched next year, another magazine. The next year, another platform. The next year, another platform. And we've always seemed to be ahead of where the market's going. In some cases, we're wrong, but we've made more good decisions than bad.
Right.
The key is making decisions.
Why that you're going to make mistakes?
Constantly reinvent. So basically, we started with a website that was about coupons. Didn't work. Started putting promotions up. Went and hired people to do content. And all those cost money. So every time I looked and said, hey, we're getting more revenues, I can put more money in my pocket.
Right.
I said, I'm going to forego the money for myself to build the business. Last 24 months of this economic crisis, same example. So I'm looking at the industry and saying, where's it going? Some of the core advertisers have dropped out. They're shunning travel agents. They're not supporting the media that supports them, which is unfortunate. I can't hold a gun to their head. I think it's stupid. I think they're misguided. Ironically, they're pulling advertising from traditional media like magazines as if magazines are dead. Yet Google, the largest online advertising business in the entire world, that they all quote verbatim, Google is running print ads in every freaking magazine you look at. So ironically, they're going Google. Google's the way to go.
Right.
All online, online, online. Yet Google itself is going print, 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 print.
Right.
And the Android system, every time you turn on the TV, every time you go past a billboard, a bus, Android, 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 in 2 years it became the largest phone operating system in the world. Why? Not because of Google, but because of traditional media. So the idea that traditional media is dead is ridiculous, but we have to look at that and say, if that trend continues, how do we protect ourselves?
Right.
So we take our content, and right now, we're looking at that content that we spend a lot of money to create and saying, how can I leverage that into another business model? So for instance, my audience is travel agents. So I sit back and say, what services do either travel agents buy or sell? And how can I put myself into that transaction? So a few years ago, 5.5 years ago, we launched a site called hotelrewards.com. Since I own all these magazines and websites, and I talk to 85% of all travel agents across the country, daily, weekly, monthly, I started to use my own advertising vehicles to promote a platform that I actually owned, as opposed to taking money from a third party to build their business.
Gotcha.
So I'm buying advertising in my own magazines to promote a site that I own, and in 5 years it goes from not existing to being the third largest affiliate in the world for hotels.com.
Wow.
So it's basically funding lots of our new development, and it was sort of an afterthought. And then based on that, we're looking and saying, what services do agents need? Well, agents need marketing services. What's the first thing you need to start a business? You need a website. The websites that are out there are junk because they don't have what? Content. But I own all this content, so now we're building an application so the agents can go online, build out their own website in 5 to 10 minutes, say, I want a cruise-focused website. These are the destinations I want featured. These are the advertisers I want featured. It generates a website, and it costs them $50 a month. But for me, if I was starting up from ground zero, it'd be a $10 million upfront investment to build that. Instead, I own the media, I own the marketing, I own the content, I've got a CFO, marketing people, everything, right? So what I need to do, I need to build the platform. So for $1 million, instead of $10 million, I build the platform, and then instead of spending $2 million to advertise it and hope it works, it costs me nothing to advertise it, because I own the vehicles. And I'm pretty confident because I know the audience. They're going to look at this as a superior solution, priced at the same price point as the current website, and we're going to say, would I rather have this or this?
Wow.
Done. And then our goal is to get 10,000 websites at $50 a month. That's, do the math, that's $6 million in top line revenue. What's my cost? $1.5 million, $2 million a year to operate. So that's a business that theoretically, if it works, if you forget all the upfront investment, could cash flow $4 million a year in profit. If it works.
If it works,
If it works. Let's say it works 1/4 as well. Okay? $1 million a year in profit. Let's say 1/8 as well. $500,000 a year. So if it does that, if it's 1/8 as successful as I think it'll be, okay. It takes me 2 years to recoup my investment. And then I've got a business that's helping thousands of agents. That is supporting us with diversified revenues. And, is making my profit. After 2 years, I've recovered my initial investment, and it's cash flowing.
And it feeds it.
Everything, feeds everything else, because now I go to an advertiser like Royal Caribbean. Let's say I have 1,000 websites. I say, not only am I putting you on my 2 or 3 websites, but I'm going to put you on 1,000 websites out there. Ooh, okay. Now all of a sudden my core business becomes more attractive because I bundle it together with 1,000 consumer websites.
Right. Your creativity, is it yours? You come. I mean, how does that process for you work as far as creativity?
You know what? If I'm reading a story, if I'm reading an article in the Wall Street Journal today about somebody doing something, and if it's outside our industry, if it's not even related to media, if I see something, it sometimes just triggers a thought, and I start coming up with ideas. And so I think, what are they doing? How are they doing it? How can I apply what they're doing?
The place where you wanted to share about the Today Show.
I
need to hear that.
All right, so this is funny. All right, so we're setting up, and the studio for the Today Show's Studio 1A or whatever it is downstairs on the street. Right. But then they have it upstairs, so they're always going up and down the stairs shooting different segments, right? The 3-minute clip here, 5-minute clip there. Right. So I'm setting up in their kitchen area because it's going to be a foodie thing. Right. And just before me, right on the other side of the counter, they're setting up to do a dessert thing where a girl lost 100 pounds with exercise and the right food. And around the corner on the L, Ted Danson is there along with Christy Yamaguchi doing a live interview. So Ted Danson shows up. He's like, what's going on here? You know, while they're filming something else over there. He's looking at the stuff. He's like, well, that smells bad. And he's like, you got live worms. He goes, I could eat one of those. So I said, you should give it a try. So he goes over and shoots a segment. Right. They then run downstairs to set up between commercials for the next segment. And then he just hangs out, and he's like milling around, he's asking stuff and kind of joking. He's a funny guy, really good guy. In my brief encounter with him. And then he all of a sudden picks up one of these live mealworms and just throws it in his mouth, a live mealworm. Now, we've got gourmet food out, but some of it's really funky. And there's worms in a salsa, but that was provided from the Insectarium in New Orleans. So it's a controlled environment, it's properly cooked, everything else, right? So he eats this freaking mealworm. It looks like a brown maggot, a long brown maggot, really nasty. So he eats it, and then he's like, ooh, wow, that's got an interesting aftertaste. And he's like, give me some water. Drink some water. Then we had to replenish the water for the hosts who were going to come shoot the segment with us, and he walks away. So I'm like, wow, I can't believe he just ate that worm, because I'm not doing that. And what he doesn't realize at that moment, and still to this moment doesn't realize, that we had stuff shipped in for this segment from restaurants and overseas, this fruit called durian and all this stuff from the Insectarium. But the live bugs were simply a prop, and we couldn't get them from the Insectarium or any other controlled environment. So my publicist had them brought in from Petland Discounts. So basically, Petland Discounts. He's like,
it was pet food.
Oh my! I was like, it's pet food.
I want to thank Mark for his friendship and his courageous example of creativity. To find out more about Mark and his work, or to order his book, Travel Unscripted, go to www.travelunscriptedbook.com.